Hey, folks. So just a couple seconds ago, I got a text message from Bryan Sutton, which is always very exciting. And Bryan wanted to know if we were still talking today. We sort of roughly talked about shooting a video together, and I guess we're doing it now. So this is a little, unrehearsed, unscripted talk with Bryan Sutton, just like we did last time. And Bryan, how are you doing over there?
I'm good. This is life, Marcel. It goes in all different directions at once.
Yeah, sometimes you're just suddenly shooting a video. That's actually pretty normal in my life.
Yeah, well, that's my day. Today's my day to be home doing Artist Works responses, and I'm already down here, got the lights up. This is a good break for me. I've been, kind of deep into the teaching world, so we got lots of good stuff to talk about.
I think that the big thing we should kind of get out of the way is your camp. You invited me to be an instructor at the camp, which I'm very excited about, but I was hoping maybe you could tell my audience just a little bit about what it is, what to expect, how to be involved.
Yeah, well, it's the first weekend in June. It's called the Blue Ridge Guitar Camp, and there's a website that you can really imagine. It's blueridgeguitarcamp.com. We had our first last year, trying to launch it in 2020, and of course, so it was the first annual last year, and so now we're onto the official second version of this, and had a great time last year. And it's in Brevard, North Carolina, beautiful campus, Brevard Music Center. For anybody that may have experienced a longer kind of week-long plus camp, this is a little more of a kind of a concentrated, intensive, it's really kind of 4 days total. And then there's the big concert on Saturday night that kind of where we'll, sell tickets to the public at large and have some people come in. But it's all just a huge amount of fun. And again, we had a great time last year with, the classes and got, always working to get great instructors, and special guests come in for some intimate chats and thoughts about one thing or another. And ultimately, for my passion as a guitar player and a teacher, which is why I like that you're there this year, is that, I enjoy playing the guitar and talking about the guitar, but I enjoy talking about learning and what any of us can do to be better learners, and understanding that part of us, just a human in motion playing an instrument is a big experience beyond just trying to get the right notes in the right spot, and, to the psychological and the neurological and the physical experiences that are all going on. That's a lot, and I think it's important to understand all that. And that's part of what I've integrated into my teaching. And I'm watching some of your videos. It's the world and the culture of kind of bluegrass in this playing, but this music is so physical. And I like getting folks together that want to talk about that and get to those kind of nitty gritties and open up the hood of the engine and see where it goes.
Yeah, it is. It is funny that there's so much instruction that is kind of based around playing fast, or playing the right notes, or this and that. And there is an entire idea of how do you learn something, or for us, how do you teach something? And I feel like some people are reluctant to go there, and it disappoints me. I want to see what's going on in your brain. How do you imagine it? How do you think about it?
Yeah, well, I think, to the credit of just the generations of great bluegrass guitarists to just laser focus into that world. I mean, people that grew up playing this music, started when they were kids, don't know what they're doing. We're trying to unpack it, and they're not by any fault of theirs. They're just not able to articulate it, and that's okay. And sometimes the best learning is just sort of sitting at the feet of somebody that speaks in this real big, broad, kind of vague way. But again, I like that, but I also like saying, here's some granular nitty gritty that can work and is repeatable and transferable and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it seems like you've hired teachers that are kind of all over the map too. I like the word granular. I would describe a lot of my instruction that way. I do get into the specifics, but I think a great teacher in the other camp is Jake Eddy. Jake Eddy is really about learning the tunes, learn the fiddle tunes, learn the repertoire, and you're going to learn so many other things that you don't even realize you're learning if you just learn the repertoire. I wouldn't call it the polar opposite of the way I teach, but there is a big difference there in the ways we do our instruction.
Well, and I think, to just this kind of music, it's folk music. It's people doing what they do and people sharing their own personal experiences. And that's, again, why I like between Jake and Chris Eldridge and Courtney and Matt Munisteri, talk about a wild card coming in from the world of traditional jazz. And he and I were talking about, just his history with learning harmony and how that relates to how most people learn these fiddle tunes. And it's like, that's so cool. Just to your point, have these other angles that sort of get to the same spot. And I think that serves a lot of what folk music is about, and learning folk music. And there's not some sort of pedagogy that we're all following and some kind of rule book of this manuscript that says, here's where you put your finger all the time in St. Anne's Reel. It's like, all these other variations of this conversation of what good is and what tone is and what groove is and how you harmonize or how you create variations. And you get into the big artful sense, that's one of the things Courtney did last year, was just get people really listening deeply. And, that's the kind of stuff that really excites me. It's the kind of stuff that I've done to help me be better. And so to be able to share that with folks, that's really the stuff there.
So you mentioned briefly all the other teachers. I'm really excited to be part of the group and to work with all those folks. Can you give us an idea of maybe what some of the courses might be, or what kind of things might be taught?
Honestly, I'm still working it out. Last year we had Grant Gordy and Michael Daves and David Greer, myself and Courtney. And I had this idea of like everybody kind of with a lane. Like for me, it was mechanics for the sake of music. That's what I called the class. Grant Gordy was there for improvisation. David Greer was there to be David Greer and also talk about, his, what he, in my mind, what he does best, which is create fiddle tune variations. So every teacher had kind of their focus. And I'm not sure that I've totally defined that yet. I mean, obviously, I can see each one of these folks coming in and bringing their strengths. I know, you and I have talked about, various kind of routes. At this point, I don't know how heavy-handed I want to be with that, trying to define a lane.
Right.
And with such a wide variety of kind of players this year, I'm kind of a little more like, what do you feel the most sort of confident about or passionate about as far as your teaching? What do you want to bring based on these sort of thoughts kind of we're talking about today of what's important? And, just let you go. I feel like even when and if there's some crossover to the discussion earlier, it's going to be unique enough to each person to where there's going to be value in it no matter what.
So if people want to apply and they want to go to the camp, what should they do?
Well, BlueRidgeGuitarCamp.com, there's an application process, and it's a little, again, just as everything about this is kind of a little different than if you've experienced other camps in the past. There is a submission video, an application video that's part of this, or two. And the main point of that is to not just freak people out, even though that will do that. But really my goal for this is to have all levels of players represented. So I want to know who you are and how you play. And if you're a relative newbie to the world of bluegrass, that's okay. There's a class for you. But I just want to make sure that we also have space for other people in your class and other players that are, at various levels as well. And so it's about kind of trying to evenly populate, each class. And, that worked last year and that'll stay in as part of the process here.
So if I'm hearing you right, don't be freaked out about the audition video. It's more to judge where you are.
or don't feel like you have to, earn your spot. You're not good enough or whatever. If you don't make it, it means more than likely the class that your level represents is full, or, in the interest of just trying to broaden the scope. This is where, this is what we're putting together. And then, try again next year.
Yes. Well, that sounds great, Bryan. Can't wait for it to happen. Give me the dates one more time.
It's the first weekend in June. I think that Wednesday, I don't have the calendar in front of me right now. I think it's May 30th. And for anybody that's, wants to bring family and friends, we're set up for all that kind of stuff too, with some local lodging. And again, the big Saturday night concert, the North Carolina Guitar Celebration. We're still in the early stages of putting that up, but we've already got Daryl Scott, Don Flemons. I'll be there and all the instructors, and, just continuing to find some other fun pals to bring in and play some guitar in front of people.
That concludes the advertising part of this video.
Yes. See you, Marcel.
I thought that we could talk a little bit about vocal tunes, because in our last video that we shot together, which was close to a year ago, I think it came out in December, we talked about those fiddle tunes. I think that we could talk a little bit about vocal tunes and maybe, how to create breaks and vocal tunes. And it's like we've covered the two big camps, right, in bluegrass guitar, and maybe that would be useful to the folks. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Where should you start? Let's say I'm at home, I'm doing some private study, right, and I want to take a break on a vocal tune. What's the first thing I do?
I would suggest a deeper understanding to the point of being able to sing and play the melody, and that's in the world of folk music and bluegrass is kind of a loaded statement, but for you, not trying to define for Ricky Skaggs or me or whoever, or Tim O'Brien or Bill Monroe, what their version of the melody is. For you, can you create some kind of association and internalize kind of understanding of a song? What's that? Your love is like a flower. Like somebody might sing that line a little differently than I just did it, but that's okay. That's what's in my head. As I'm not trying to be a singer necessarily, but when I can vocalize, that proves that I'm not limited to just some version of the thing on the guitar. I'm not thinking licks or connective kind of tissue yet. I'm just thinking like these core essential notes that define this melody for me. And again, I'd love to be able to play that. And again, I'm already maybe fast forwarding through a lot of work of just finding that melody on the guitar. What you're seeing me do here is a certain amount of just guitar fluency from years of doing this kind of thing. And I know this song. But this is where, for folks new to this, I think it's also important to recognize that I'm in the key of G, and that when we take a minute and look at every one of those notes, they're all in the G major scale. That's something you've covered. Oh, of course. And again, to some of the earlier points of discussion, where that's the physical doing of this song on the guitar. A melody is a group of notes. A scale is a group of notes. And to a point, as far as the fret, hand, and arm, when I can engage in more group of notes kind of positional approach, that's, especially even in first position, is setting the stage for what can potentially happen all up and down the fretboard. But anyway, the point is that to the music of it, every one of those notes is in the G major scale. So even if I'm hunting and pecking for a while, which is not a bad thing, I'm self-discovering where this melody that's in my head, where it is on the guitar. And also noticing that correlation between where I am in the tune, what chord is being played. So I'm just kind of putting all this together. And that's really, building blocks. If we're looking for now the end goal of like, okay, here's a fully fleshed out, break with licks and connective kind of phrasing and interesting notes and stuff like that. I guess in the interest of time, that's where, for me, 30, 40 years of playing that song differently every time. Just because we're continuing to build vocabulary, we're continuing to explore or be influenced by, somebody else that's playing this tune or whatever it may be. But those core things, I would just say to get our discussion to a level, those are the things that I think are the most important.
Yeah, let's demo that with another tune. Yeah, let's say I do the same thing you did with Love's Like a Flower, but I'll do it with 9-Pound Hammer. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we'll see maybe some disagreements in melodies, right? Some opinions.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, this 9-Pound Hammer is a little too heavy for my size, buddy, for my size. Roll on, buddy, don't you go so slow. How can I roll when the wheels won't go?
You're now investigating some of those more vocalese kind of things, like the bluesy, the characteristic, the vibe of bluegrass and those kind of notes, which, are an extension of what I was doing, which was like that, without any of that sort of inflection and color. So, and that's cool because you're finding that flatted third, creates that bluesy sound versus da 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 da, which sounds really kind of vanilla. Da 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 is a little too heavy. If I'm going, let's make this blues. Da 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 heavy. Da 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 side. Da 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 da. Done it for my side. Well, on buddy. Da 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 so slow. How can I pull? Da, 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 da. Go to the G there when you played it the first time. Some people in 9-Pound Hammer, and again, this is folk music, go to the 5 chord right there. In Tony Rice's early versions, he would go to the 5 chord. What's the right way? I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's not in stone anywhere, and none of us have gotten fired from the world of bluegrass or asked to leave the island because we did one together. Some of us have tried pretty hard to get fired from bluegrass, but so far so good.
I just did. We just put out a video with Stash, so that guy's trying pretty hard to get fired.
Yeah, court of public opinion will rule, but I'll be on his side. I love watching everything that he does. I think it's so cool.
So if we took this tune, I've kind of I feel like I stole your tune a little bit. Now we're talking about 9-Pound Hammer. I think one of the first things that someone could do if they were thinking about this, kind of going through this journey, is they might want to break that up by phrase, right? Because I think it's really intuitive vocally for instance, if you're writing down the lyrics, you can kind of figure out where each phrase ends, right?
Mhm.
Now that we found that on an instrument too, we can start thinking about how we would decorate each phrase. I'm not talking about fancy stuff. I'm just thinking about guitaristic kind of things. So for instance, that first piece of melody, well, the 9-pound hammer, right? We get a lot of time that's just on this G note. We're singing the word hammer. So maybe we could kind of recycle that G note with like a drone or a little line or something. Right?
Yeah, I'm a fan. I do a lot of the kind of banjo rolly, kind of slight
Yeah.
We're sort of treading water in that G information. You could kind of repeat yourself, but slightly different. Just a good old Lester flat or just a traditional G run. Also, for me, the extension of that first phrase is leading to the 4 chord, the C. So I'm also thinking, where am I, but also where I'm going. That's just kind of a bluesy lick. I got away from the melody there. If I wanted to make that a little more melodically centered. And now I'm getting into this other world of, again, we're in the key of G. We've got the blues information, the minor pentatonic. And then now kind of linking all this together where I'm aware of where this phrase in G is leading to the phrase into the 4 chord, the melody note. Again, when you're seeing folks like us do this on stage, we're like talking about what word am I going to choose next in a sentence I'm going to say to you, and why that might happen in learning English. But this is, I think, a solid breakdown to recognize kind of what these things do, what these pieces and parts do, these essential building blocks of key, center, melody, phrasing, and within the phrase, where is it going? That's the point I was trying to make.
You grabbed some nice things there too. So our simple melody in that second phrase, right? If we're playing it kind of more major, less bluesy, right? And the line that you played didn't start on the right note, on the melody note, let's say, right? You started up here, right? Like that. Don't remember how you ended it, right? But you ended up on the right note. In your brain, I feel like you're almost thinking like, oh, this thing should descend.
Yeah, right.
Kind of doesn't matter where I start, but I'm going to end in the right spot, and it's still going to follow like the shape of the melody, the arc of the melody, rather than the specifics.
Yeah. Oh, I love that idea. And that's a great one for fiddle tunes, because that, as an instrumental melody, the tune, like a Blackberry Blossom type melody, that's just all about ascending and descending, and when that informs your improvisation. And again, we don't get as much of that in vocal tunes, but it's still there. The underlying principle is still there. Da 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 da. That you can replicate that general shape, and the stuff that's different and happening every time is still kind of based on a lot of the same stuff of G scale, G pentatonic, versions of itself. And that, as a teacher, I'm a fan. I kind of define success or try to help people define success by just noticing different. There's always going to be another way to play it. You're not going to run out.
Yeah.
And that's part of the work is to recognize and appreciate that and accept it.
We've just done a lot of work on being careful players, right? We sit down, we learn the melody, hopefully with our voice, we learn the chords, we see how that melody interacts with the chords, we learn the melody on our instrument, we can look at the phrases, we can decorate the phrases, we can build breaks, and you end up with this really tasteful, I actually think kind of modern sound where people are carefully considering that melody. That's not what Tony Rice does. So let's talk about that a little bit. What about players that really don't touch that melody? What are they thinking? What's going on in their mind?
I never got a chance to really dig into like that depth of question to Tony, but I do notice from having studied a lot of Tony that there's sort of a system of his playing where even when he's going, it does all that. I can tell that he's aware of where the C chord is and where the D chord is. And that's something, not to try to, throw darts and knives, but when I see people kind of in that world but not quite honoring the song, that's where it starts feeling a little more like just nebulous. Because it is bluesy, basic information, you can get away with a lot. But I feel like, to the point of Tony, he used that system and that vocabulary, but in a way that was still kind of centered towards chords. And like even when he went to the C, you heard that he was communicating the 4 chord and whatever song like that he was playing. So, I feel like to answer your question, it's kind of a blend of all that. I think he was really aware of that inherent structural stuff as he was flying around in his Tony Rice kind of way.
I think that's a great way that you've said it right there. The inherent structure. You can see it in a lot of those breaks where I think a lot of people would listen to him and they would describe it the way I described it when I asked you the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he just playing stuff?
Yeah.
But when you sit down and you analyze the stuff, the phrases that he plays tend to mirror the phrases in the real song. And I feel like people don't grab that enough. But if you look at like, there's a well-being path on that old mountainside. That first vocal line ends up about in the middle of the C chord, that vocal line ends, right? Look at Tony's break, right? Where does his line end? Right in the middle of the C chord.
Yeah. It's that, like you said earlier, like the shape of stuff. And again, I don't think Tony was so conscious about it, but I think that was just his, natural kind of beautiful musical instinct was to sort of feel, or, what I've said over the years, like be informed by the song. Even when I'm improvising on a fiddle tune, I would like to know that somebody could kind of guess and have a pretty good guess of what song was being played. I don't want to make that happen every time, but that's a certain goal.
Yeah, that is one goal that's very useful. People know what you're playing.
Yeah. And again, I'm certainly the player that's going to push boundaries and get outside of that kind of stuff. And I love doing that too. And I think that's to the higher level players that are out there that are saying, well, I just always got to find this melody. I think that's part of the fun too, is to be melodic even when you're not playing the melody. I think that's also part of kind of a responsibility of a musician when you are making a choice to leave that melodic arc or flow or target notes or whatever, is still having a melodic quality in your improvisation. I mean, to me, that's what, even in that, I mean, there's shape, there's interest. It starts somewhere, it kind of goes somewhere. It doesn't feel like such a blah, here's a bunch of notes. It has a certain phrase essence about it and strength.
I think that might be the component that's missing sometimes when we hear players that play a bunch of notes. By the way, that also is a valid approach. Weirdly, if you can defend your improvisation, it's valid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't sit down and say, I want to play a lot of notes. But I think a lot of people miss that phrasing element when they try to, beat Tony Rice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And, I think that it's always that tricky balance. And I'm also a fan of kind of embracing this idea that it doesn't have to be this or this. And there's a lot of good part of life that's somewhere in between, these sort of sweet spots, these sort of just right amounts of one thing or another that are different for different folks. And that's okay. And that, especially in this world, what we don't all sound like Tony Rice or Doc Watson or Norman, and that's okay. And that's what makes it fun. I sound like me, you sound like you, and David Greer is thankfully David Greer. And I love that. That's such a, spice of life kind of thing.
I like to describe it as a spectrum that you sort of get to decide where you sit on at any particular moment, where maybe over here we have the melody as written, whatever that means. Yeah. And then over here we have the strangest thing you could possibly imagine, right?
Yeah.
And all of those things in between are valid, but based on context of the song that you're performing or what the person did before you or what the person after you is going to do, you get to decide where you are in this spectrum.
The total real world of improvisation in it, because bluegrass is not, learned in a vacuum, and you really experience it with a group of people. And to take that listening to a bigger picture of, you played your solo so straight and melodic, that gives me motivation to honor that, but then move it forward, or you played something totally left field, so I'm kind of inspired, or with a lot of notes, so I'm going to use a lot of space, not to try to defeat it or to, to make people forget about it, but just to kind of keep this interest in variety and variational kind of experience. In the world of jazz, that's I remember talking to Julian Lodge about that, just a lot of steady work and like degrees of soloing, of the concentric circles of the target kind of thing, and then how far out do we get? What are the elements in place that cause the more out thing to happen? Into like improvisational practice, and we did talk about this last time, like little themes and motifs where, if it's a song in G and that flat fifth, which just by itself is really kind of aggressive and angular, but if I'm playing, Your Love Is Like a Flower, that's out. That's not, level one guitar solo, but there was still some melody in there, but I was featuring that, that note was sort of my little cue to kind of say, okay, this is a couple of concentric circles removed from the center, and that's okay. It was, then the practice of it was just the experience of saying, can I hear that? Not where do I force that in, but can I just hear that kind of being involved in the phrasing? And that might be something that Bela Fleck plays, some little, and that's like, okay, that's cool. And
yeah, so, that's on the table now. Let me pick up that ball. Yeah.
Yes, and.
Yes, and. Bryan, you want to tell us one more time? Tell us about the camp, when it's going to be, where to go.
All right, BlueRidgeGuitarCamp.com. Just Google it. You'll see also some great pictures from last year that I think they'll help make the decision. But that's everything that you need will be there. There's also a Facebook group for Blue Ridge Guitar Camp, and it's Brevard, North Carolina, basically the first weekend in June 2023. There is, for folks that might be interested, there are funds available for some scholarship and things like that. We want, just to have a good crew of people there, and excited about it. Again, we had our first kind of inaugural year last year and really felt like we got off in a big bang, and so we're all excited. Everybody that's on the team here, really excited to kind of get back and tweak what needs to be tweaked, but just, try to have as much fun next year as we did this year.
Sounds good. Well, me and Bryan will both be there, so come hang out with us, and you all have a good one. We'll see you next time.
That midnight train spilled her blood at the crossroads when the bells didn't ring. Now lay me down by that crossing sign.